I've seen happen with over the years with this incredible, extraordinary experience that Sid had. We were talking this morning that it's 42 years since I met Sid, and he had his experience in 1973. And you know, what continues to amaze me is that it remains one of the best kept secrets in the world. And yet when Sid had this profound uncovering of the three principles, he told Ken and I within a very short time that these principles would change the fields of psychology and psychiatry and help humanity in a way that nothing ever had before. And yet at the same time, he said it was nothing new, that it was as old as mankind and the world itself. And it's amazing that how an ordinary man could have this profound experience that would ultimately end up starting a whole new division in a university based on the three principles, and that it came from within him, that it was nothing that he was searching for. He wasn't looking for anything. He had no idea that anything like this existed. And yet this spontaneous revelation, the wisdom of the ages, just came forth, and his life was never the same again. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people are benefiting by it. And still, it's the best kept secret in the world. And Ken and I saw Sid change from somebody who really wondered about life and had insecurity in his life. And when I first met him, that's why I really liked him and his wife, is because they had some insecurity, and so did Ken and I, and we became very close in our insecurity. And then when he had this experience and shared it with us, and even to make that statement that this understanding, these principles would change the fields of psychology and psychiatry. How could that be? Like, how could an ordinary man have such, we thought, temerity to make such a statement? And yet he said it in a really matter-of-fact way, with absolute certainty, in a calm tone, just as if he was saying, would you pass me the butter? That this is going to change, ultimately, the world, if people heard. And so over the years, as the psychologists were drawn to the island and drawn to Sid, incredible things started to happen. He didn't do any marketing. He didn't advertise. People were just drawn to that spiritual energy that he began to walk in the moment he had this revelation. He changed physically. There was a dramatic change in him, how he looked from when he had some stress on his face, and he would walk a little bent over as if he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. And then with this experience, it was like he was imbued with life and joy. And he told us he had discovered the secret to life. So it was a little unnerving, to say the least. Doubt. A little unnerving. But what can you do when you see such incredible change, and that it transferred to his wife and children, and then the people were drawn to him, and the psychologists who just heard word of mouth, and we saw them change. We saw really mentally ill people that sought him out, just unknowingly seemed to walk down his driveway, that they'd heard, here's a man that can help. And within moments, it seemed, sometimes just over a simple cup of tea, because Sid would always say, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist. But just in a simple chat with him, somehow the power that he walked in, the knowledge, the true knowledge that had come to him, woke people up to their own wisdom and they healed themselves and threw away their medication and walked out living life in a way they never had before. Families came together. Marriages came together. There were people from all over the world that came down his driveway, and he welcomed them all out of the goodness of his heart and helped them without thought of himself. That always had been his greatest passion, was to see people change and find their true self, their natural birthright. And he was the living example of that spiritual fact that what we want is inside of us. And so once the psychologists came to the island and they started to change and share whatever they were learning, their own insights with their clients, and sometimes their clients would have an insight that was even more powerful than their helpers. And then their helpers would be helped by the insight that their clients had. And it just rippled out very quietly, almost under the radar, so to speak. So that's why I keep saying it was like the best kept secret, and it's still the best kept secret. But slowly, I think being able to do this talk, for example, is going to give more people an opportunity to hear the power of this story, this extraordinary story, this miracle that happened to an ordinary working man that gave the world 3 spiritual principles that speak to how humanity creates their experience in life. Simple spiritual facts that everybody already has within them. I mean, this is what we've marveled at.
Absolutely.
So often is that the simplicity of the answer already being inside us. And I remember again when Sid first shared this with Ken and I and said it's thought. Like if you see just thought, the principle of thought, you'll find your dreams will come true. And I would think to myself, well, if it's in my power to change, then when I wish to change and I pray to change and I have all this thinking about changing, then why am I not changing? Why do I remain the same? And I didn't know that when he was talking about the power of thought, he wasn't talking about our personal thinking. He was talking about the power of insight, of that original thought within all of us. And it wasn't until I had my own little insight about thought creates feeling that I finally moved past my confusion, my very strong resistance to what Sid was saying, to realizing that the answer was inside of myself. And if it was inside of me, then that spoke to the fact that what Sid was pointing to, that the answer is inside all of us. And I'm going to say one last thing before I turn it over to Chip here, because the thing that kept me going despite my early confusion and strong resistance was that the feeling Sid walked in was of such comfort and solace to me that despite my being scared to wake up and find the beauty within myself, I mean, that sounds odd to say that, doesn't it?
It is odd, but it is the way it is.
You know, that you can be scared of your own true self, your own true nature, and yet it was I saw after it was my own personal thinking, just hanging on to those old beliefs. But it was the feeling he walked in that kept me by his side and by Barb's side. And I know it was the same for Ken. And that showed me over the years that it's not the words we say, it's where we live, the simplicity of living in our true nature that then reaches out and touches those around us and ripples out into the world. And Chip and Jan were amongst the very first people that I met on Salt Spring Island, who over the years have had this incredible love and generosity of spirit and have helped so many people over the years and have never wavered a moment from their total dedication to helping Sid and helping ensure that we do the best we can to ensure that the integrity of Sid's message and of these principles remain as pure as possible. And I'm honored to work with them.